Colonel Jack Thunderbolt Morrison stood at the edge of the airfield, watching the sleek F-16 Fighting Falcons streak across the Nevada sky like silver bullets. The year was 1975, and the Air Force was buzzing with excitement about their new generation of fighters. Fast, agile, and packed with cutting-edge technology, these jets represented the future of air combat. Jack adjusted his worn leather jacket, a relic from his days flying the A-10 Sky Raider in Vietnam. At 42, he was considered old school by the younger pilots who dominated the base. His weathered face bore the marks of countless missions over enemy territory, where he had learned that sometimes the prettiest plane wasn't always the most effective one. "Hey, Thunderbolt!" called out Captain Rick Stevens, one of the F-16 hotshots. "Still dreaming about those old prop planes?" The group of young pilots behind him chuckled, their crisp uniforms and confident smirks reflecting their belief that they were the elite of military aviation. Jack had heard this kind of talk before. Since returning from Southeast Asia, he had been assigned to various desk jobs and evaluation committees. The brass considered him a valuable asset for his combat experience, but many of his younger colleagues saw him as a dinosaur clinging to outdated ideas about air warfare. "Actually," Jack replied calmly, "I'm thinking about something new, something that might surprise you." The pilots exchanged glances. Morrison was known for his unconventional ideas, most of which the higher-ups had dismissed over the years. He had repeatedly advocated for aircraft that could provide close air support to ground troops, arguing that the military was becoming too focused on high-altitude, high-speed engagements while forgetting about the soldiers fighting on the ground. "Let me guess," Stevens said with a grin. "Another one of your slow-flying tank busters? Come on, Colonel. This is the jet age. Wars are won with speed and technology, not flying tractors." Jack smiled quietly. He had just come from a classified briefing about a new aircraft project that was being developed in secret. The A-10 Thunderbolt II was unlike anything the Air Force had ever considered. While other nations were building faster and higher-flying jets, this plane was designed to fly low, slow, and close to the enemy. The concept had emerged from hard lessons learned in Vietnam, where fast-moving fighters often struggled to effectively support ground troops engaged in close combat. The A-10 was built around a massive 30mm GAU-8 Avenger cannon that could fire depleted uranium rounds capable of penetrating tank armor. The aircraft itself was designed to take punishment and keep flying, with redundant systems and armor plating protecting vital components. "You know what your problem is, Morrison," another pilot chimed in. "You're still fighting the last war. Modern conflicts will be decided by beyond visual range missiles and electronic warfare. Ground support is becoming obsolete." Jack had heard this argument countless times in briefing rooms and strategy sessions. The prevailing wisdom in the mid-1970s was that future wars would be fast-paced affairs decided by technological superiority and speed. The idea of an aircraft designed specifically to fly low and slow over battlefields seemed counterintuitive to many military planners. But Jack remembered the faces of the infantry soldiers he had supported in Vietnam. He recalled countless radio calls for close air support, where troops pinned down by enemy fire desperately needed accurate, sustained firepower that could distinguish between friend and foe in chaotic battlefield conditions. Fast jets dropping bombs from high altitude often couldn't provide the precision and loitering capability that ground forces needed. "Maybe you're right," Jack said diplomatically, "but I've seen what happens when pilots get too far removed from the troops they're supposed to support." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of General Patricia Hayes, the base commander. A no-nonsense officer who had fought for recognition in a male-dominated field, she had earned respect through competence and determination. "Gentlemen," she announced, "I need to speak with Colonel Morrison." As they walked toward her office, General Hayes glanced at Jack with a mixture of curiosity and concern. I've been reading your reports about close air support doctrine. Some interesting ideas, but they're certainly not popular with everyone. Jack nodded. Sometimes the best ideas aren't the most popular ones, General. That's what worries me, she replied. The Pentagon is investing billions in next-generation fighters. Convincing them to spend money on what some people are calling a flying tank isn't going to be easy. Inside her office, General Hayes spread out classified documents on her desk. The papers detailed preliminary designs for the A-10, including specifications that seemed almost impossible to believe. The aircraft would be capable of carrying 16,000 pounds of mixed ordnance, including missiles, bombs, and rockets. More importantly, it was designed to operate from rough airfields close to the front lines, reducing response time for ground support missions. The contractors have built prototypes, General Hayes explained, but there's significant opposition in Congress and within our own service. Many people think this project is a waste of resources. Jack studied the technical drawings with growing excitement. The A-10's straight wings and twin engines mounted high on the fuselage would allow it to fly slowly enough to accurately engage ground targets while providing excellent visibility for the pilot. The titanium bathtub surrounding the cockpit would protect the pilot from ground fire, while the aircraft's simple, robust design would make it easier to maintain in field conditions. "When do we get to see it fly?" Jack asked. "Next month," General Hayes replied. "They're planning a demonstration for a group of Pentagon officials and congressional representatives. The future of the program depends on that flight." Jack felt a familiar stirring of anticipation, the same feeling he had experienced before important missions in Vietnam. He understood that this demonstration would be more than just a test flight. It would be a chance to prove that sometimes the most effective solution isn't necessarily the most glamorous one. Over the following weeks, Jack threw himself into studying everything about the A-10 program. He reviewed combat reports from recent conflicts, analyzed the capabilities of enemy ground forces, and corresponded with infantry commanders about their experiences with close air support. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that this aircraft could save lives and change the nature of ground combat. But he also became increasingly aware of the opposition the program faced. In mess hall conversations and informal meetings, he heard colleagues dismiss the A-10 as an expensive mistake. Some called it the Warthog in reference to its ungainly appearance, though Jack thought the nickname might eventually become a badge of honor. "Morrison's lost it," he overheard Captain Stevens telling another pilot. "He actually thinks that ugly beast is going to revolutionize warfare. It looks like something from World War II. Jack didn't respond to the criticism directly, but he began preparing for the upcoming demonstration with the intensity of a man whose reputation and beliefs were on the line. He knew that if the A-10 failed to impress during its first major public appearance, the program might be canceled, and with it, any chance of providing ground troops with the dedicated close air support aircraft they desperately needed. The night before the demonstration, Jack stood alone on the airfield, looking up at the stars. Tomorrow would determine whether his vision of close air support had any future in the modern Air Force. He thought about all the soldiers who might benefit from having the A-10 watching over them, and all the pilots who might dismiss it without ever understanding its true potential. In the distance, he could see the hangar where the prototype A-10 waited for its moment of truth. The morning of the demonstration dawned clear and crisp at Edwards Air Force Base. Colonel Jack Morrison arrived early, finding the airfield already bustling with activity. Ground crews performed final checks on the A-10 prototype, while security personnel set up viewing areas for the distinguished visitors who would determine the aircraft's fate. Jack watched from a distance as black sedans began arriving, carrying Pentagon officials, congressional representatives, and high-ranking military officers. Among them was Senator William Crawford, chairman of the Armed Services Committee, whose support would be crucial for continued funding. The senator had publicly questioned whether the military needed what he called expensive flying trucks, when modern warfare demanded speed and sophistication. Nervous? General Hayes approached Jack, her expression serious. She had spent the previous evening fielding calls from Washington, where budget hawks were already sharpening their knives for defense programs they considered outdated. About the plane? No, Jack replied. About whether these people will understand what they're seeing? That's another story. Near the viewing stands, Jack could see Captain Stevens and his group of F-16 pilots talking animatedly with some of the visitors. Their body language suggested they were not speaking favorably about the upcoming demonstration. Stevens caught Jack's eye and smirked, clearly enjoying his role as the voice of modern aviation wisdom. The A-10 prototype sat on the tarmac like a mechanical predator. Its unusual design drew stares and whispered comments from the crowd. Unlike the sleek fighters that dominated military aviation, this aircraft looked purposeful and rugged. The massive cannon protruding from its nose gave it an almost medieval appearance, as if someone had mounted a siege weapon on wings. Test pilot Major Sarah Chen emerged from the briefing room, her flight suit crisp and her expression focused. She had been chosen for this demonstration not only because of her exceptional flying skills, but also because of her ability to communicate the aircraft's capabilities to non-aviators. At 34, she had already established herself as one of the Air Force's most skilled test pilots, with experience in everything from experimental fighters to heavy transport aircraft. "Ready to make history?" Jack asked as she approached. "Ready to show them what real close air support looks like," she replied confidently. Major Chen had spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying the A-10 systems and practicing the maneuvers that would demonstrate its unique capabilities. The demonstration began with a technical briefing in the base auditorium. Jack watched the audience's faces as engineers explained the A-10 specifications. When they mentioned the aircraft's maximum speed of 420 miles per hour, some visitors exchanged skeptical glances. In an era when fighters routinely exceeded Mach 2, this seemed almost comically slow. "The A-10 trades speed for other capabilities," explained Dr. Robert Martinez, the lead engineer. "It can loiter over a battlefield for extended periods, providing continuous support to ground forces. Its low speed actually becomes an advantage when engaging targets that require precision." Senator Crawford raised his hand. "Doctor, can you explain why we need an aircraft that flies slower than some World War II fighters? Shouldn't we be moving forward, not backward?" Dr. Martinez had anticipated this question. "Senator, in Vietnam, our fastest fighters often had difficulty providing effective close air support because they moved too quickly to accurately engage targets near friendly forces. The A-10 can fly slowly enough to visually identify targets and deliver precise fire without endangering our own troops." The technical briefing continued with discussions of the aircraft's survivability features. The A-10's engines were mounted high on the fuselage, making them less vulnerable to ground fire. The pilot sat in a titanium shell that could withstand direct hits from small arms and artillery fragments. Redundant flight control systems meant the aircraft could continue flying even after suffering significant damage. "It sounds like you're planning to fly into a shooting gallery," commented General Robert Foster, a Pentagon official known for his preference for high-technology solutions. "That's exactly what we're planning," Dr. Martinez replied. "Close air support by definition means operating in dangerous environments. This aircraft is designed to survive and complete its mission under those conditions." After the briefing, the group moved outside to the viewing area. The A-10 prototype had been positioned on the runway, its engines spinning up with a distinctive whining sound that was quite different from the screaming jet engines they were accustomed to hearing. Major Chen's voice crackled over the public address system as she ran through her pre-flight checks. "Tower, Warthog 1 ready for demonstration flight." Even using the aircraft's unofficial nickname seemed like a small act of defiance against those who viewed it as ugly or primitive. Jack smiled. knowing that Chen was sending a message about her confidence in the aircraft's capabilities. The A-10 began its takeoff roll, and immediately the observers could see how different this aircraft was. Instead of the dramatic acceleration of a fighter jet, the A-10 climbed steadily and deliberately. Its straight wings and twin engines gave it an almost leisurely appearance as it gained altitude. "Not very impressive so far," Captain Stevens muttered loud enough for several visitors to hear. But Jack knew the real demonstration was just beginning. The aircraft disappeared over a ridge, heading toward the designated target area where a collection of old tanks, trucks, and other military vehicles had been arranged to simulate enemy positions. Minutes later, the A-10 reappeared, flying low over the target area. At an altitude of only a few hundred feet, it began a series of attack runs that showcased its unique capabilities. The aircraft could turn sharply while maintaining low airspeed, allowing the pilot to keep targets in sight for extended periods. Then came the moment Jack had been waiting for. The distinctive sound of the GAU-8 cannon erupted across the desert, a deep, rumbling roar unlike anything the observers had heard before. The 30-millimeter rounds tore through the target vehicles with devastating effectiveness, sending pieces of metal spinning through the air. "My God," whispered Senator Crawford, his previous skepticism replaced by obvious amazement. The demonstration continued with multiple attack runs, each one highlighting different aspects of the A-10's capabilities. Major Chen showed how the aircraft could operate from a rough dirt strip that had been prepared nearby, demonstrating its ability to deploy close to frontline positions. She performed tight turns around simulated enemy positions, maintaining enough control to deliver accurate fire while avoiding imaginary anti-aircraft threats. During one particularly impressive run, she simulated an engine failure, showing how the A-10 could continue flying and fighting even with significant damage. The aircraft's redundant systems and rugged construction allowed it to complete its mission despite the handicap. General Foster, who had been skeptical during the briefing, leaned forward in his seat as the A-10 made another gun run. "How many rounds per minute does that cannon fire?" "Approximately 3,900 rounds per minute," Dr. Martinez replied. "But pilots typically fire in short bursts to conserve ammunition and maintain accuracy." As the demonstration progressed, Jack noticed a change in the atmosphere among the observers. The initial skepticism and casual dismissal were giving way to serious attention, and in some cases, obvious excitement. The A-10 was proving that it could do things that no other aircraft in the inventory could accomplish. The climax of the demonstration came when Major Chen performed a series of close air support scenarios that had been developed based on actual combat situations from Vietnam. Flying at speeds that allowed precise target identification, she engaged multiple targets while staying clear of simulated friendly positions marked with orange panels. "In a real combat situation," her voice explained over the radio, "this capability means the difference between effective support and friendly fire incidents. Ground commanders can trust this aircraft to deliver accurate fire even in close proximity to their own forces." Captain Stevens was no longer smirking. Like the other observers, he watched in fascination as the A-10 demonstrated capabilities that conventional fighters simply could not match. The aircraft's ability to loiter over a battlefield, engage multiple targets with precision, and operate from primitive airfields was becoming undeniably impressive. As the flight demonstration concluded, Major Chen brought the A-10 in for a landing on the main runway. The aircraft touched down smoothly, demonstrating the excellent visibility and control characteristics that made it suitable for operations in challenging conditions. Senator Crawford was among the first to reach the aircraft as it shut down. "Major Chen," he called out as she climbed down from the cockpit. "That was quite a show. But I have to ask, can this aircraft survive against modern surface-to-air missiles?" Major Chen had been expecting this question. It represented one of the biggest challenges facing the A-10 program in an era of increasingly sophisticated air defenses. Major Chen removed her helmet and looked directly at Senator Crawford, her expression serious but confident. Senator, modern surface-to-air missiles are indeed a threat to any aircraft operating at low altitude, but the A-10 has several advantages that make it surprisingly survivable. She gestured toward the aircraft behind her, its battle-scarred appearance somehow more impressive after the demonstration. First, this aircraft can operate effectively at very low altitudes, below the radar horizon of most SAM systems. Second, its infrared signature is much smaller than conventional fighters because of the engine placement and design. Most importantly, it's designed to take hits and keep flying. Dr. Martinez joined the conversation, carrying a folder of classified test results. Senator, we've conducted extensive survivability tests. The A-10 can lose an engine, half a wing, portions of its tail, and significant hydraulic systems while still making it home. No other aircraft in our inventory has that level of battle damage tolerance. General Foster, who had been quietly observing the post-flight discussions, stepped forward. All of this is impressive, but I'm still concerned about cost. How do we justify spending money on this when we could buy more F-16s? Jack Morrison had been waiting for this moment throughout the entire demonstration. This was his chance to make the case he had been preparing for months. General, may I address that? He walked over to a display board that had been set up nearby, showing comparative cost analyses that he had helped prepare. An F-16 costs approximately $12 million. The projected unit cost for the A-10 is about $4 million. But that's not the real comparison. Jack pointed to a series of charts showing mission effectiveness data. In Vietnam, it often took multiple fighter-bomber sorties to achieve the same level of target destruction that one A-10 can accomplish. When you factor in the reduced need for multiple aircraft, lower fuel consumption due to shorter transit times from forward bases, and reduced pilot training costs, the A-10 actually represents significant savings. Captain Stevens, who had been listening from the edge of the group, couldn't resist challenging this assertion. But Colonel, those cost comparisons assume that close air support missions will dominate future conflicts. What if they don't? It was a fair question, and one that Jack had grappled with during his analysis of the program. Captain, that's exactly the kind of thinking that got us into trouble in Vietnam. We prepared for the war we wanted to fight, not the war we actually faced. Senator Crawford nodded thoughtfully. Go on, Colonel. Every conflict since World War II has required close air support, Jack continued. Korea, Vietnam, and every smaller engagement our forces have been involved in. While we're building aircraft to fight hypothetical air-to-air battles against sophisticated opponents, our ground forces are repeatedly finding themselves in situations where they need dedicated close air support. Major Chen added her perspective as someone who had actually flown the aircraft. Senator, I've flown F-16s, F-4s, and now the A-10. Each aircraft is excellent at what it's designed to do, but when ground commanders need someone to stay overhead for hours, engaging multiple targets with precision while coordinating closely with ground operations, nothing else comes close to what this aircraft can do. The discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Colonel William Barnes, a highly decorated infantry officer who had served multiple tours in Vietnam. General Hayes had arranged for him to attend specifically to provide the ground perspective on close air support. Gentlemen, ma'am, Colonel Barnes addressed the group, I commanded an infantry battalion in Vietnam for 2 tours. I can tell you that the difference between good close air support and excellent close air support is measured in lives saved and missions accomplished. He gestured toward the A-10. I've read the specifications for this aircraft, and I can tell you that my soldiers would have killed for this kind of support. An aircraft that can stay overhead for hours, communicate directly with ground units, and engage targets with precision while distinguishing between enemy and friendly forces. That's not just valuable, it's essential. Senator Crawford was clearly impressed by this testimony from someone who had actually commanded troops in combat. Colonel Barnes, in your opinion, Would an aircraft like this have changed outcomes in the engagements you were involved in? Without question, Barnes replied firmly. There were multiple occasions where we needed sustained fire support against enemy positions that were too close to our own forces for conventional airstrikes. Fast movers dropping bombs from altitude simply couldn't provide the precision we needed. An aircraft like this, capable of using its cannon for surgical strikes, would have saved lives and allowed us to accomplish missions that were otherwise too risky. Dr. Martinez seized on this testimony to address another concern that had been raised. This highlights an important point about the A-10's primary weapon system. The GAU-8 cannon provides a level of precision that's impossible with conventional bombs or missiles. The pilot can start and stop the engagement instantly, adjusting fire based on real-time battlefield conditions. General Foster was beginning to look convinced, but he raised another practical concern. What about pilot training? Are we going to need to develop completely new training programs? Major Chen smiled at this question. Actually, General, the A-10 is easier to fly than most fighters in our inventory. The controls are more straightforward, the systems are less complex, and the flight characteristics are very forgiving. A pilot transitioning from basic training could be mission-ready in this aircraft faster than in an F-16 or F-4. Jack saw an opportunity to drive home a crucial point. That's another cost advantage we haven't fully discussed. Reduced training time means lower costs per pilot and faster deployment of qualified aircrew to operational units. The group spent the next hour examining the aircraft up close, with Major Chen and Dr. Martinez explaining various systems and design features. Senator Crawford was particularly interested in the titanium armor surrounding the cockpit, asking detailed questions about its effectiveness against different types of threats. The pilot protection system was one of our highest priorities, Dr. Martinez explained. We studied every aircraft loss in Vietnam and designed this system to protect against the most common threats that brought down close air support aircraft. As the formal demonstration concluded, Jack found himself in conversation with several of the visitors who had been most skeptical at the beginning of the day. The transformation in their attitudes was remarkable, and he could see that the A-10 had accomplished something that technical briefings and paper studies could never achieve. "Colonel Morrison," Senator Crawford approached him as the group began to disperse. "I have to admit, this aircraft has capabilities I didn't expect. But I'm still concerned about congressional support. There are a lot of people in Washington who think we should be investing in next-generation technology, not what they see as old-fashioned ground attack aircraft." Jack had anticipated this concern. "Senator, respectfully, I think those people are missing the point. The most advanced technology in the world is useless if it can't accomplish the mission. This aircraft represents advanced technology applied to a specific mission requirement." "How so?" "The titanium armor, the redundant flight control systems, the advanced cannon system, the precise flight characteristics, all of these represent cutting-edge engineering solutions," Jack explained. "The difference is that instead of pursuing speed and altitude for their own sake, every technological choice was made to maximize battlefield effectiveness." 3 months later, Jack stood in the Pentagon briefing room where the A-10 program's fate was being decided. The successful demonstration at Edwards had generated significant support, but budget pressures and institutional resistance remained strong. The final vote was closer than anyone had predicted, but the A-10 program was approved for production. As Jack walked out of the briefing room, he encountered Captain Stevens in the hallway. "I guess I owe you an apology, Colonel," Stevens said somewhat sheepishly. "That demonstration was pretty impressive." "You don't owe me anything, Captain," Jack replied. "But maybe you owe it to the ground troops who are going to benefit from this aircraft to keep an open mind about what makes an effective weapon system." Years later, when A-10s were providing devastating close air support during the Gulf War, eliminating hundreds of enemy tanks and saving countless American lives, Jack would think back to that demonstration at Edwards. The aircraft that had been mocked as too slow and too ugly had proven its worth in the most demanding test of all, actual combat. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, affectionately known as the Warthog, would go on to serve with distinction in every major conflict involving American forces. Its unique capabilities would save thousands of lives and demonstrate that sometimes the most effective solution is not the most glamorous one. Colonel Jack Morrison retired from the Air Force in 1982, but he never stopped advocating for the importance of close air support. In his final evaluation report, his commanding officer wrote, "Colonel Morrison possesses the rare ability to see beyond current doctrine to identify genuine operational requirements. His advocacy for the A-10 program demonstrates strategic thinking of the highest order." The aircraft he had championed continued flying and fighting well into the 21st century, proving that good ideas, properly executed, can overcome institutional resistance and conventional wisdom. Every time an A-10 provided close air support to troops in contact, it validated Jack's belief that sometimes the best technology is the technology that works, regardless of how it looks or how fast it flies. The Warthog had indeed roared to life, and its roar would continue to provide comfort to friendly forces and terror to enemies for decades to come.